Hello, and welcome to 5 Minute Math. Today for our number talk, we are looking at these two fractions and asking which is greater. Now, hopefully we notice that these are both unit fractions. That means we have a numerator of 1, and so we can actually evaluate these pretty simply if you know a trick about fractions. So let me show you a few different examples. So I'm going to see if I can draw some squares here. And I'm going to try to make each square exactly the same. So let's pretend these are all the exact same squares. So if I were to cut this in half, you see how big each of those pieces are. Then if I were to cut this into fourths, you notice that each fourth is smaller. It's actually half of a half, right? Then if I were to cut this into sixths, we're getting smaller than that. And if I can cut this into eighths, even getting smaller. What do you notice? The numerator's the same, but the denominator keeps getting bigger because I take that same square and I cut it into 2 parts. But if I take the same square and cut it into 4 parts, each part has to be smaller because there's only so much square to go around. By the time I cut that same square into 8 parts, then it gets really, really small. Imagine if I were to take this square and cut it into 100 parts. You realize how tiny that would be? So if we have the same numerator, in this case they both happen to be 1, we can evaluate this fraction simply by looking at the denominator. If I took a square and cut it into 5 parts, and if I took a square and cut it into 7 parts, the square that has 5 parts, each of those parts is going to be greater because that's a smaller number, which means each part can be a little bit bigger. So when you have two fractions with the same numerator, you can evaluate them by just looking at their denominators.